This won't be popular, but
Sandy Munro made a prediction about the EV industry, and I disagree with his prediction, although he made a few other predictions with which mostly, really, I agree. And he talked about one more thing that I think is very important for all Tesla stock investors to understand, and I haven't really seen this being talked about much at all. And just to be very clear, I really like and respect Sandy Munro. His teardown videos of EVs are absolutely amazing, and I highly recommend to everyone to watch every single one of these videos. Simply, I just have a different opinion than he does on this specific issue. So let's dive in.
I think what you're going to see is that the United States is going to have to allow Chinese vehicles in. We do have BYD making buses here in Los Angeles. The bus manufacturing that BYD is going to want to keep on doing is going to probably, they're going to be trade-offs. There's always trade-offs in politics, and they're going to want to bring their cars in. And when they do, it'll be very similar to what happened when the Japanese they started bringing cars over. The Chinese vehicles are not junk. I know the press says they're crap, but I spent about 3 months a year from 2014 until 2019, actually 2013 to 2019, in China. I guarantee you their products are as good as anything that can be put out by BMW, Mercedes, Ford, whomever. They're just as good. And I'm predicting that by about 2030, there's going to be a giant amount of Chinese cars here in the United States because they are well in advance of most of the OEMs here in the U.S.
Wow, that's quite a prediction.
It's not really. This is like rolling off a log prediction. Yeah.
Are Chinese EVs pretty good compared to other EVs that come from legacy automakers? Yeah, I think Sandy's right on that one. And I do believe that the biggest competitors for Tesla will come from China. However, are they coming to the US specifically? Yeah, I don't think so. First of all, if we just look at what BYD actually says, they reiterated multiple times that they do not want to come to the US. This is super recent. BYD says, Inflation Reduction Act, the one that gives you $7,500 if you buy an EV in the US, that law is keeping out cheap EVs from the US market somehow. The US isn't under our current consideration due to the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. I strongly believe that the IRA may slow down EV adoption in the US. And to be more specific, it will slow down EV adoption of Chinese-made EVs in the US or foreign-made EVs in the US. But it will certainly accelerate the EV adoption in the US. Looking at this situation between China and the US and this dispute about a certain island that is next to China, yeah, I think China has made it pretty clear that they want to make sure that that island officially belongs to China. And the stance of the US right now is not exactly very clear, and these tensions increase every single year, and now maybe every 3 months, sometimes even every month. Look at these latest headlines. Just read this one and look at the wording that they use. And I just need to scroll down. This is just from 2 weeks ago. Tensions after close call between China and the US in Taiwan Strait.
Chinese ships just go as fast as it can, basically, and cut right across the bow, the front of the boat of the USS Chonghoon, which was the American ship that had been traveling with the Canadians. They've just put out new footage today that shows how close it was.
So I think the Chinese companies look at this and say, you know, if we build factories in the US, what if something happens between these two countries? We probably lose everything that we have in the US. So I don't really see why the Chinese would be coming to the US unless the tariffs came down, but the tariffs are really high. The tariffs are almost 30%, so it's very unlikely that Chinese will make cars in China and then import these vehicles from China to the US. They would have to build a factory within the US. And if you don't do it, not only do you not get the $7,500 EV tax credit, but also you get taxed with this extremely high tariff. However, if a situation between China and the US de-escalates, then yeah, I definitely see that happening, but I don't see that situation being de-escalated anytime soon.
I've been pushing since 2019 that by 2030, we will be at 50%. And there's a thing that John McElroy put on his show called Sandy's Law or Munro's Law that basically says once we hit 5%, it'll double every year until we get to 50%. So that means that by about 2028, we should be about 50% of all the new cars being manufactured are going to be electric vehicles. And Lauren wasn't that much different than when I am. But we've been pushing this for a long time. I think that the adoption rate is going to go up a lot faster than everybody else thinks, and the reason for that is because children from 7 to 13 do not like gas vehicles.
Okay.
I think Sandy Munro is going to be a lot closer to the truth than the consensus is. Check this out. This is hilarious. This is a forecast from 2017. This was the consensus of how many EVs would be sold globally. And as you can see, they just looked at, okay, how many EVs are we selling now? And then they just made a linear projection, but this is what actually happened. And now you would think they would have learned from their lesson, but no. They just look at, okay, how fast have we grown? Okay, we're just going to keep growing at this exact same pace. And in 2027, we will only have 20 million EVs sold globally. We are not going to grow exponentially is what they are saying. So I mostly agree with Sandy on this point, but I don't think it will have to do all that much with kids not liking gasoline-powered vehicles. I think it will have to do a lot more with people looking at EVs and saying, oh, it would be so dumb to buy a gasoline-powered vehicle because that would be a waste of money to get a product that is actually worse.
What's going on today with battery recycling? Do you see them being repurposed, or will they be scavenged for their raw materials?
Well, I will tell you the guys that are trying to recycle are having a big problem trying to get batteries. They aren't dying as quickly as the big OEM marketing people would have you to believe. Like range anxiety, that was an OEM, big OEM, ICE company, whatever, trying to get that. We should get biodiesel because that's much more beneficial than going to electricity, on and on. Right now, if you're recycling batteries, the big problem is getting them. There's not as many dying or getting into crashes and whatnot as what you'd think. Like the press loves this. I mean, if it bleeds, it reads, right?
Right.
So,
right.
So at the end of the day, there isn't that much that we can get from a recycling standpoint.
That, of course, is really good news because that is one more reason to buy an EV over a gas-powered vehicle.
Do you believe that there will be this sort of infrastructure that will evolve to where you will get refurbished battery packs to extend the life of some of these used vehicles?
I'm sure that there will be. I know that people are using old BMW i3s and whatnot, and old Leafs and what. They park them in the backyard and they turn them into, the car then becomes a battery pack that
right.
they use to drive the house. So you'll have that kind of stuff. But those vehicles are old, and that technology was old, and things have moved a lot. You're seeing like almost 100% difference between one year to the next as far
right.
as technology and efficiency for battery usage and whatnot. It's totally different now than it was in the olden days.
Make sure to pay very close attention to what Sandy says next.
So 150,000 miles, 200,000 miles, that's what you can get an ICE vehicle if you take care of it properly. With an electric vehicle, you're looking at 500,000 miles. I don't see it getting in. I see people keeping their cars for a lot longer. There's no reason. You don't wear out an electric motor. Batteries do not diminish the way that the marketing that came from the big OEMs, they don't diminish that quickly. In the olden days maybe, but not now.
What Sandy just said has a few very important implications to us Tesla stock investors. Some positive, but also some negative, which are not really that apparent at first. The positive is that, obviously, because EVs are so much better, the transition will be easier because it's just a better product, and it makes sense to buy an EV if it is going to last you twice as long or 3 times as long as a gasoline-powered vehicle. However, if you think about this from a purely selfish point of view as a Tesla stock investor, there is a little bit of a downside, and that is, how many vehicles do we sell per year in the world right now? Well, It's probably going to be close to 100 million eventually. And if the vehicles last twice as long, 3 times as long, do we really need 100 million vehicles per year? Maybe not really. In theory, perhaps, and this is just perhaps, if vehicles last twice as long, then in theory, you would think that you need half as many vehicles. Very roughly speaking, the US accounts for about 20% of new vehicle sales in the world, but the US is only about 4% of world's total population. The US is also, of course, a very rich country, and there are not all that many countries that are rich, but there are some countries that are getting richer. For example, India has been growing really fast and it has over 1 billion people. But its new car market is relatively small compared to the US and especially compared to China. So as some of these countries develop, their car markets will also grow. In other words, just because EVs are going to last a lot longer than gasoline-powered cars, it does not mean that the global vehicle market has to shrink. Another very important point to remember is that EVs later, once they actually truly scale, they will be a lot cheaper when you just compare sticker prices between EVs and gasoline-powered vehicles because there are a lot less parts, there's less complexity, meaning that a lot of these countries that are not as rich, they will be able to afford a lot more new vehicles compared to before, even if they do not get any richer. If you are trying to project the long-term value of Tesla stock, that is an important thing that you really need to think about. Unless you know that full self-driving is going to be solved, which is going to dwarf Tesla's valuations from EVs. And in that case, then the total size of a car market is not going to matter as much because Tesla's valuation is going to come mostly from full self-driving and not so much from EVs anymore. And in this video, I talk about why Tesla board members are not buying more Tesla stock. My name is Matt. Just like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.